Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating paradox that sits right at the heart of how we think about work. It's an idea that might just challenge everything you believe about being in control of your own career. You've probably heard this a million times, right? Be the architect of your own job. We're told we can just reshape our roles to perfectly match our skills and passions. But what if that's only half the story? What if the blueprint for your job was actually drawn up long before you ever even showed up? All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start with the dream of sculpting your perfect job. Then we'll uncover this idea of an occupation's hidden hand. We'll see what the data actually revealed, lay out the new rules of work, and finally, figure out how to craft smarter, not just harder. Okay, let's start with a concept that's basically become the cornerstone of modern career advice. This promise that you can, and absolutely should, be sculpting your own perfect job. So the official term for this is job crafting. And the theory is pretty straightforward. It says we aren't just passive drones who take a job description as gospel. No, we're active crafters. We're always making little tweaks to our tasks, our relationships, all to make our work feel more like us. And look, this idea has absolutely blown up, and for good reason. I mean, in today's world, with all the uncertainty, the internet, globalization, being able to shape your own role feels like a superpower. And the research backs it up. Job crafters consistently report higher engagement, more satisfaction, and better performance. It sounds like a total win-win, right? Well, this is where our story takes a really interesting turn. What if, while you're busy laying all the bricks for your perfect job, there's a hidden architect, a force you can't even see, influencing your every single move? You see, the old view is totally focused on the individual. It's all about your choices, your actions. But the new research we're digging into today says, hang on a second, it argues that your occupation, the field you're in, plays a massive role. It sets the stage, it defines the rules of the game, and it even decides which tools you're allowed to use. And what's so fascinating is that this isn't even a total rejection of the original idea. Actually, if you go back to the original paper from 2001, the authors hinted at this all along. They called it a situated activity, which is academic speak for your environment matters. Your context can either supercharge your ability to craft or just stop you dead in your tracks. Now, to really get this, we have to make a clear distinction between a job and an occupation. Your job, that's your specific role at your company. But your occupation, that's the whole field. Think nursing, or software engineering, or accounting. These occupations have their own powerful cultures and unspoken rules that can be even stronger than your actual bosses. So this brings us to the real heart of the matter. Researchers wanted to put this theory to the test. And they didn't just do a small survey, oh no. They conducted 2 enormous studies, digging through data from hundreds of occupations and literally tens of thousands of people, all to figure out how much our occupations are really pulling the strings. And the very first finding was, frankly, staggering. It turns out that a full 26% of the difference in how much people craft their jobs can be explained simply by what occupation they're in. Just let that sink in for a moment. Before we know anything about your personality, your boss, or your company, just knowing you're a graphic designer versus an accountant tells us a huge amount about how you shape your work. Okay, so if your occupation matters that much, what's the secret ingredient? The obvious answer seems to be autonomy, right? I mean, more freedom must mean more job crafting. Simple. Except, that's not what the data showed at all. The answer was a definitive, surprising no. And this is the first part of our paradox. At the broad occupation level, having more built-in autonomy was actually linked to less individual job crafting. Researchers think it might be a case of too much of a good thing. Maybe when you have so much freedom, it just creates confusion, and you lose that drive to make your own changes. So a second study then looked at the outcomes, and it did confirm what we've always believed. Yes, when you craft your job more, you tend to have higher job satisfaction, and you're less likely to want to quit. So far, so good. But, and trust me, this is a very big but. That is not the whole picture. There seems to be a hidden cost, a trade-off that we almost never talk about. And here it is, the paradox in its full glory. That very same act of job crafting was also linked to more burnout and feeling like you're underpaid. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Why? Because crafting is work. It's extra work. You're expanding your role, taking on new things, often for no extra pay, and that can leave you feeling totally exhausted and undervalued. So where does that leave us? With all these new, messy, complicated findings, we clearly need a new way to think about job crafting. We need a model that actually accounts for both you, the individual, and the powerful world you're working in. So here's the new model. Think of it like a cascade or a waterfall of influence. At the very top, you have the occupation. It sets the zoning rules for the entire field. Then, within those rules, you have your specific job and its level of autonomy. That entire context then shapes your actual crafting, which finally leads to your personal outcomes, the good, the bad, and the burnout. The biggest takeaway here is that your occupation acts as a moderator. Think of it like a volume knob. It can amplify the good effects of your crafting, or it can totally weaken them. If you're in a field where crafting is the norm, your actions might have a huge positive impact. But if you're in a field where it's rare, those exact same actions might just fall flat. Your occupation literally changes the rules of the game. So what are you supposed to do with all this information? Well, the answer isn't to stop crafting. The answer is to start crafting smarter. And thankfully, the research gives us some really clear advice for both individuals and leaders. So for you, as an individual, the advice is pretty clear. First, get real about your occupational context. What does it allow? What does it restrict? Second, always be mindful of that burnout trade-off. Remember, crafting is work. And make sure you're getting support from coworkers to protect yourself from the downside. A great place to start is crafting to get more autonomy, because that seems to kickstart other positive changes. And if you're a leader, your job is a bit different. Yes, you should give your people more autonomy at the job level to encourage crafting, but you have to know their limits. Your biggest and most important role is to help your team manage the dark side of this. Acknowledge their extra effort, provide support, and make damn sure that your proactive people feel seen and valued. Which brings us all the way back to our first question, but now, hopefully, with a much deeper understanding. Are you crafting your job, or is your occupation crafting you? Well, the research seems to say the real answer is both. You are an architect, for sure, but you're not building on an empty piece of land. You're building inside a city that has its own rules, its own culture, its own history. And the true art of crafting isn't just designing your perfect little building, but understanding and working with the landscape you're building on.